before we start tonight, welcome everybody. I just wanted to say a couple of things that have nothing to do with the film we're watching, but a couple of things that I wanted to sort of mention. One is, I don't know how many of you are watching the impeachment hearings, but and this is not like politics one way or another, although I think you probably all know exactly what my politics are. But I just sort of want to point out the importance of video to sort of have them make their case. Because, you know, before this all happened, everybody was talking about, well, they have to bring in all of these people. They have to like have witnesses. They have to have testimony. And what they did by using video effectively, and they were able to really make that case. And they really like put all the dots together about all these things happen. It was through video editing that they're making their case. And then the other thing that's worth just mentioning is that we're in the age where cameras are everywhere because people have them on their phones, or there were all these people, you could see them with, you know, cameras on selfie sticks and like taking all kinds of media. And then there were body cams for policemen and there were security cameras. So, and I was thinking about this the other day and just thinking about the difference between how this crime was documented and what happened in 1963, where we had a couple of cameras and a couple of 8mm cameras and a couple of still cameras. And what we see and what we know now is so different because there's so much visual documentation of data. That's all I wanted to say. Just something I thought about and wanted to sort of mention. One other thing, yes.
Bart, you need to write an op-ed on that. That's really, really good. No kidding. Write your thoughts down. I'll help you with it. I promise. I swear.
I have to write.
Yeah. Okay. Then we'll have a phone conversation. I'll record it and I'll help you write it. Really, it's nothing hard. But what you said, and the fact that you did that JFK museum stuff would really make a difference, and that you're a film professor. All of that together works. What you said was really good.
Well, thank you. So, Gordon.
Yeah.
Why did we pick this film this week?
Why did we pick it? Well, one, it's going to be not this month, but this would be the year of its 50th anniversary, which is pretty mind-boggling to think about. Released in late November 1971. And for me, I think it has got to be on any list of I'll say the top 20 greatest American movies ever made. It's one of my all-time favorite films, and it's like just about the only one on that list that's really a downbeat, because it is a downbeat movie with not a lot of humor. Just a few moments of humor in the whole movie, but I think it's brilliantly done on so many levels.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those levels. I mean, first of all, you know, Peter Bogdanovich has done just a few films before this, and nothing quite at this level. And
two before that,
right? Which I think I've seen one of them, but haven't seen the second one.
Well, 1.5. I've got a quick story I could tell you about that too.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, time. Because I have been around Bogdanovich at several film festivals, heard him tell a lot of stories. The best ones he told were when he was at, I think it was a USA Film Festival event in 1982 at SMU. And he hosted a screening of this. And this and Target's and Last Picture Show. And Target's is his first official directing credit, first film. I happen to know about a little item called Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women.
Right.
And when the discussion was getting very hoity-toity and pretentious and everything at the Bob Hope Theater over there, I raised my hand and went, "That's all great, but I want to hear about Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women." And everybody turned around, looked at me like, "What the blank are you talking about?" But he loved it. He spent like 20 minutes talking about it. And in a nutshell, when he had started like being as an apprentice to Roger Corman, like a lot of people did, one of the things Corman assigned him to do was take footage. Corman bought a couple of these Russian sci-fi movies in the very early 60s and made other Americanized movies out of the footage. And he had already made one from this particular bunch of footage from this, in and of itself, pretty great for the time and everything, Russian space epic. He had made one called Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet, but he wanted to make another one. He hired Bogdanovich to use the footage, shoot some new scenes, and supervise it. He does so. He's credited, his director credit is Derek Thomas on it.
Huh.
And he shot new scenes with Mamie Van Doren as the leader of the prehistoric space women out on Leo Carrillo Beach in California. Sort of like the real poor man's Raquel Welch in 1 Million BC from a couple of years before. I actually have a copy of this. And so that's kind of the half of the 1.5. He worked on the Wild Angels for Corman too, and he acted in it.
So I didn't know this thing that Corman was taking these Russian films and recutting them, because the kind of great irony is that in the early Russian film days, they would take American films and recut them. So it's kind of interesting that Corman has done the reverse of that.
I'm sure it's on YouTube. It's public domain. I'm sure that's on YouTube. He narrates it too. A sci-fi movie taking place in the distant future of 1998. And he narrates it also. And he had a hell of a fun time talking about it. And the next day in the morning news or something, there was a headline like, Bogdanovich reveals previously unknown movie at SMU last night. And, well, it wasn't unknown to nerds like me, but thank God most people aren't nerds like me. But yeah, I sort of went, yeah, that was me who started that. But the stories he's told about picture show kind of changed over the years too, from the festivals and things I've seen him at.
So let's talk about how these stories have changed. So what were the earliest stories you've heard him tell about the film?
Well, that was the first time I saw him in public. The stories also changed between his podcast on Turner Classic Movies and Polly Platt's podcast. The stories changed about the making of it. I think she says she's the one who talked him into doing the book. It was apparently Sal Mineo who first brought him the book. He had thumbed through it on a newsstand before, didn't care for it. Sal Mineo wanted to do it. I thought it was a great book, but he had gotten too old to do it by that time. Even, which I don't know exactly how old he was, but the people who wound up being in the cast weren't teenagers either. But then it was another producer, and I think it was Bob Raffleson, because Bogdanovich had entered into the deal to start this new company called BBS. I think it's BBS Films, with Bob Raffleson, the guy who created The Monkees, directed 5 pieces. Yeah. And I think it was Raffleson who brought him the book again, and this time he had decided to do it. He had a deal with Sergio Leone that failed, that wound up being made without him. And Polly Platt talked him in, also thought it was great. He wasn't impressed by the book to begin with, but she saw the potential in it. And that was also the same time he had met Orson Welles. Now those stories kind of changed too, because he credits Orson Welles with getting to do it. But in the Polly Platt podcast, she said Welles thought it was, or at least when he saw the screenplay, he thought it was dirty. He thought the screenplay would make a dirty movie. I didn't want him to do it. Welles didn't want him to do it. But at first, I guess he came around afterwards, but the stories behind the casting of Ben Johnson have changed over the years, because I do remember at SMU, he had gone through, at first he was going to cast an old-time country music star from, real old-timer guy like Roy Acuff or somebody like that. And then he had met Ben Johnson when he was doing the stuff with John Ford on one of John Ford's movies way back there. And I do remember, so the later stories, like in the TCM podcast, was that, Ben Johnson at first didn't want to do it. Now in 1982, Uh,
And the reason Ben Johnson didn't want to do it was there were too many words.
right.
And it was too much to memorize. And he just wanted to, like, you know, he just didn't want to deal with it. And that's sort of what I heard. And then
But
John Ford talked him into it.
the John Ford talked a bit to it, but at SMU, I remember not just too many words, but too many bad words. He thought Ben Johnson thought it was too raunchy and it had too much bad language in it. He didn't want to do it for that reason. But that John Ford and John Wayne both talked him into doing it, apparently. And you know, Bogdanovich loves doing imitations of everybody that he name drops. I remember him doing the imitations of those people. So, any rate, Johnson decided to do it for the benefit of all of us. Now, a couple of other interesting things I'll just drop real quick that he said about it at the time that I remember in '82 was, and he was speaking after watching it again over there at SMU, and he said, you know, he said, there's two things I would do different if I had this to do over. One is I wouldn't put so much nudity and sex in it. He said, I don't think that's really necessary now. They shot it in the fall of 1970 when the screen, as they said in those days, was opening up, and you know, gratuitous nudity was just expected. And according to the Polly Platt thing, it was actually in the contract to make the film that he had to have it, had to have some nudity. The other thing that was really interesting was that he said after seeing the film again, he said that for the role of Sonny, it was down to between Timothy Bottoms and John Ritter. And he said that if he had it to do over again, he would cast John Ritter in that part, because he said he doesn't think Timothy Bottoms is working in the same level with everyone else in the film. And I have to say, watching it since he said that, he's kind of right. And with all respect to Timothy Bottoms, his performance is not quite on the same level with Jeff Bridges and the other people in the cast.
Well, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that, and particularly for that scene at the very end. Um, you know, when he, you know, goes over to what's his name, who's just been killed, and I mean, it's a beautiful that's. I mean, he has scenes that work that are just really great. And
You talk about the final scene with Cloris Leachman?
no, before that,
Or
before with the kid gets run over and he puts the jacket over him.
Oh, right.
His
Sam-
real brother. His real brother who played
Sam
with him.
Bottoms.
Yeah, right. And that's just, I mean, that's a moment. And
Brilliant.
so I wanted to go over the casting in a minute, but before we do that, I just wanted to say that in watching this again, and I haven't watched this since like 1971 or 72. I really haven't seen this for a really, really long time. And I forgot most of the plot. I mean, it just totally forgot it. So I was really engrossed in watching it, but what I couldn't believe with how just incredible the performances were, like all over the place. And in so many times, I mean, you know, like the camera's in the right place and all of that is good. And, you know, the lighting is good, the sound is good, the music, I mean, talk about the music later. But what really makes this, aside from a good story, is that they're really incredible performances. And there are so many moments when you see the performance in the eyes of these actors without them saying very much, like this scene when they're having sex and you just see these close-ups of the two of them, just incredibly powerful with very little dialogue. And there's so many times or times when there's a lot of dialogue, but it's really not so much the voicing of the dialogue, but the acting, like you know, the piece by the water when Sam is, like, you know, telling that story. It's just like, what an incredible performance that is. I mean, it is just so incredibly compelling in that move in that stays with him for a long time. It's just really powerful. And I think that, you know, what a lot of the young directors of that era were much more interested in the cameras and all the whiz bang stuff that was going on. And Bogdanovich really spent time with the performance. And I think that's the thing that kind of resonates with me in watching this, is how powerful those performances are.
And I agree totally, considering that you would expect to have the style of the directors, and it's very heavily influenced by both Orson Welles and Howard Hawks, who were his two big heroes at the time, that he would get the styles right. He certainly did, but also that the performances would be so great. And that it may be just that, you know, Tim Bottoms doesn't get to have quite the same kind of scenes that the other people do. I don't want to discredit him, but in that the two great scenes you mentioned, well, the pond scene by the pond and the ending with Cloris Leachman, which to me is like in the top 10 scenes of all time. But he said something about that scene, which also may account for his feelings about Timothy Bottom, that it was very overcast when they did it. He wanted like a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing was very overcast when they did it. He wanted it to all be one seamless take without a break. And he talked about when you watch it, it's probably hard to see on video, but if you see it in the screen, and it closes in on Ben Johnson and he starts reminiscing, the clouds part and sunlight hits his face. And Bogdanovich said that was just God. That was just a stroke of God that happened. It wasn't in the lighting. And that he said you could have spent all day lighting it and not have gotten that break. But he said that Timothy Bottom, as it goes on, it's not a complete take. They do have one cutaway. And he said Timothy Bottoms blew a line and they had to stop and tried to start up again. But when they did, they didn't get much time because a huge thunderstorm broke out and washed everything away. So there is a cutaway to the pond that doesn't quite make sense. And that's why it's there. And I think maybe he blamed Timothy Bottoms for that, for ruining his single take. I don't know. He did make a point of mentioning it.
I know that he mentioned that, but having watched that scene, it was just as powerful. I mean,
Yes,
the cut did not bother me one bit.
No, it is such a powerful scene, and with Johnson there.
Yeah, and one of the things that I heard during the making of this film is that he made a point of hanging out with the actors only and not even really talking much to the crew.
Right, I heard that too.
Which is, extremely unusual for a major film when there's all this stuff going on. And I think what I heard was that a lot of the crew kind of resented him for not paying attention to what they were doing. But I think he realized that this film is going to live or die on what the performances are going to be. And so that he wanted to make sure that they had all of the right input, and they felt that all the actors felt that he was supporting them in what they were doing, and that they had a truly deep connection.
Right. As we know, there was one cast member he wound up spending a lot of time with, but he and Bob Surtees, the cinematographer, came to blows nearly a few times on it. And one of those stories is on the TCM podcast. I'm glad they made up over it, because Surtees' work in there is brilliant. Just, amazing stuff. Use of light and shadow.
Yeah, I mean, I think visually, aside from all the acting, which we can talk more about, the acting is just so great. But visually, it captures sort of the essence of small town. When I was watching it, I was kind of thinking of Fellini's Roma, which we did a long time ago. Because if you remember, Roma starts with this like weather thing, the wind blowing, and you have the wind blowing and the wind blowing at the very end here. And both of them really take place during the course of a year. And both of them are about life in a small town.
Yeah. And I could relate. I grew up in Lubbock, and in the 60s, Lubbock was still a pretty small town mentality. It's not now so much, but I spent a lot of time in my mother's birthplace, which was post 40 miles south of Lubbock, which could be the clone of Archer City, which is where, of course, they shot it and where the book takes place. This book by the great Larry McMurtry.
So how much do you know about what kind of influence Larry McMurtry had, and how, if you've read the book, I haven't, how much the film relies on the books, and where does it deviate?
Well, Murtry was with them location scouting, and I think was there for a lot of the shooting. And they had looked at other places around Texas. You know, the production was based in Wichita Falls, and Murtry said, you know, why don't we just shoot it where it takes place in you know, Archer City, which is where he grew up, which is like 25 miles south of Wichita Falls. And they did shoot there. In the book. It's not called Archer City, it's called Thalia in the book. Bogdanovich wanted to change it to Anarene because that name is similar to Abilene, which is where Red River, which is a huge influence on Picture Show More Than One Way, is Abilene is kind of a similar name. Anyway, the film actually follows the book pretty closely. And I think it's a really good adaptation. And in fact, I have to say, I had to check out kind of an urban myth about Last Picture Show book and movie, in that there's the high school gang that Duane and Sonny, Jeff Bridges, and Bottoms are part of. In the film, after the Christmas party, they're all hanging around outside the party, and I'll put it carefully and say, look at where they can find some loving that night. And one of the boys just jokes and says, well, old Farmer Brown down there south of here's got a heifer. And somebody else gang, I don't want no heifer. And they argue about that. You think it's a joke, but in the book, the gang actually does go to Farmer Brown's farm, line up and have their way with a heifer. And I had heard that rumors that scene was actually filmed. And in the early 80s, I was working on a theater festival with a guy, an actor, who said he played one of the gang and that they actually filmed that scene. And of course it was cut for, I'm hoping, several reasons. But apparently, yeah, that scene is in the book.
Gordon, that's perhaps one of the things I didn't need to know about this.
Okay. I will. All right.
I mean, it's okay, but that's all right.
Right.
So let's talk about the editing of this film, because what I heard was that that Bogdanovich edited this himself on a moviola
He did.
at his place, and he would edit it at night. So his poor little girlfriend couldn't spend time with him at night because he was editing all the time.
Yeah.
And then other places I saw, somebody said that, well, he did the first cut, but somebody else really did the real editing on that. So what is the story that you have heard?
I don't know about anyone doing a cut other than Bogdanovich. I mean, Polly Platt talks about that the nights he abandoned her to you know, all night in the editing room. There is another editor, he and somebody else, a name I don't remember, are credited as the editors. And I would kind of think not, because, or at least that Bogdanovich didn't like using a lot of fast cuts, and there aren't any in there. It's very much, it's edited with a lot of dissolves, a lot of careful, slow pacing. And he talked a lot about that. Like he, you know, the editing of the 70s was quite different. The sensibility of pacing was quite different than it is now. And I think Last Picture Show is one of the reasons for that. So I would tend to think not.
The scene with the bottle and getting hit with the bottle, that's pretty quickly cut. I mean, most of the editing is relative, I say, minimal, and it's mostly to sort of to get to the best performances. It's not like there's a kind of overly manipulative hand in the editing, you know, and it's mostly to get the writing and the words and the performances in their best way. And you know, some of them are like long takes. and some not. I mean, there's some cutting back and forth together. So let's talk about the rest of the cast, because I think the cast in this is really great. What are the performances that you like the most, other than not liking Timothy Bottoms? You've already said that he's horrible.
No, I never said he was. I did not say that, and I like Timothy Bottoms. That's just, and maybe I wish I had never heard him say that, because I have to think about it every time I see the movie now. Is he at the same level as everybody else? But
everything revolves around him.
yeah,
It's like he instigates almost everything. Well, and so does she, but that's another story.
Cloris Leachman is great, and the final scene is like a master class in acting. They apparently did it on one take. Bogdanovich says he was going from advice by John Ford. They can do rehearsals, but don't you be there for them. And if it's that emotional scene, do it in one take, because Bogdanovich says Ford had told him the goodbye scene between Henry Fonda and Jane Darwell in The Grapes of Wrath was done on the first take. And they said that the emotion is truest in the first take. And so that incredible final scene between her and Timothy Bottoms was first take, even though Cloris Leachman begged them to do another take. Yeah. And that Bogdanovich said, no, Cloris, you're going to get an Oscar. We don't need another take. And he was right. And, that she wanted to, even when she met him after that, berated him for not giving her another take on that.
Well, not only that, what I had heard was that, for days before that scene, she wanted to show what she was working on. And he said, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Right. We're there. I don't want to see any of this. And, which got her very frustrated. And indeed, it's an incredible, wonderful performance. But I would say Stanley Kubrick would think about that first take theory, because he's so famous for only getting one take, right?
By the way, don't forget, Bogdanovich competed against Stanley Kubrick for the directing Oscar that year. Neither one of them got it, but it was William Friedkin who won. But
for which film? For Friedkin?
The French Connection.
Oh,
got beat out. It was amazing. He competed against Fiddler on the Roof, The French Connection, A Clockwork Orange, Nicholas and Alexandra. Those were the other Best Picture nominees. And
The French Connection just has a great chase scene. I mean, really.
Yeah.
It's not a bad film, but it doesn't rise to the level of Clockwork Orange or Last Picture Show. I mean, looking back on that year, is that what you remember as greatness?
Just parts, just the chase, the master, revolutionized action films for sure. But yeah, it doesn't have the resonance.
I show that to every editing class I teach. Is you have to see the chase scene for the.
And just as a side note, Friedkin at the time was the youngest director to win the Best Director Oscar, and Bogdanovich, had he won, would have been the youngest. He was 31, and Friedkin was 36, I think. But
all right, so we talked about and let's talk about some of the other actors and the other roles that you thought were pretty powerful.
Jeff Bridges, his first Academy Award nomination was for that. He's great. Now, people forget that was Ellen Burstyn's first big film.
Oh, really?
She got a nomination. And Cloris Leachman wasn't the only supporting actress nominated. Ellen Burstyn was too. She is Cybil Shepherd's mother. Mm-hmm. Ellen Burstyn, by the way, fun fact, was a Neiman Marcus model in the late 50s and very early 60s. So she'd been around this area before. It wasn't Burstyn's first film. She started in the 60s, but it was her first big notable role. And next time you see it, it's one of the things about any great film is you can watch it and see something new or just appreciate a new performance every time you see it. And you see it in every decade, it has different meaning for you, which Picture Show does for me. So yeah, Ellen Burstyn's great. It was Randy Quaid, not Randy. Yes, Randy Quaid. Quaid's right. Randy Quaid's first role.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's like from the first time you see him, it's like, oh, that's right. And he looks exactly the same. The expressions are the same, the mannerisms are the same, and it's the same sort of character that he plays. I mean, it's like he's defined himself on cinema in that very first role. So Gordon, this is like something which you mentioned that I really would sort of want to spend a few minutes talking about. Because as we see films over the years, it's like our experience in the world changes and the way we see things changes. And I totally believe that every time you watch a film, it's like, are you in a good mood? You just have a fight with somebody. It's like there's this whole set of your mindset and your worldview, which as you get older, changes somewhat. So we look at the same films, we react to some things in the exact same way and react to some things in very different ways. So I'm really kind of curious that in the years that you've seen this, what are the things that you react to differently? And then I'll psychoanalyze you in terms of what you've done in those years.
I'll say that, once you've had some life, and I first saw it actually at Texas Tech in 16 millimeter, probably about 1973 or 4, and seen it many times since. So what it meant to me then, other than just completely knocking me out even then, is different now, because when I see it now, I think it's about loneliness. Once you spend some time as an adult being lonely and you've experienced pain of some breakups, pain of some people close to you dying, it's very much about loneliness. Every character in it is really compelled and informed by loneliness. And that's why Sonny, the Timothy Bottoms character, just can't bring himself to leave Archer City, Anarene, in the film, which apparently his studio wanted Bogdanovich to end it with him getting in the pickup truck and driving out of town and not doing that last scene. And he said, absolutely not. I made this picture for that last scene. He goes back to Mrs. Popper. He goes back to Ruth Popper because out of sheer loneliness. And because her husband is neglecting her. In the novel, he's gay. That is barely hinted at in the film. There's just the barest hint in the film that she's very lonely and that she takes him back at the end in that amazing final shot because she's lonely too. And that I've decided a whole lot of great films. Midnight Cowboy is another film that affects me deeply, and it's about loneliness, about what people will go to get away from loneliness. So that's very much to me what it's about to me now.
So why is it in small town Texas, no one can find a real sense of happiness? There isn't anybody in that film that is sort of happy with their lot.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm sure it's hardly restricted to small towns in Texas, but
I think more so because you're stuck there. Everybody knows everything. You can't have an affair with everybody not knowing it.
Yeah,
but the rich people are not particularly happy. The poor people are not particularly happy. I mean, nobody seems pleased.
and they weren't. Archer City wasn't real pleased about seeing their dirty laundry put out for everybody to see either. And from what I've heard that when they were shooting it, the real people they were playing, some of them were still living in Archer City and were watching themselves being depicted, which had to be kind of weird. But
I see a note here from Carol that's really, I think quite apropos. Coming from a small town of 688 people, I think it's about mind-numbing boredom. And I think that indeed every one of those characters, as well as being, lonely, is terribly bored with the possibilities of, that's all there is. And, the excitement about going to a pool party is merely something that's different than the everyday mind-numbing reality that you're sort of faced with.
You're right. If you're talking about the pool party scene in the film,
I didn't start that. Did you talk about the pool party scene in the film? Did you enjoy that nude scene there? In 1971, that was a big deal, I bet.
That was a big deal, and I know I've heard that the agents in Dallas at the time weren't real keen about the people in the small roads doing that nudity. That was, and I'm sure people, from everything I've read, the people in Archer City were just horrified by all of that. Now, the last couple of times I've seen it in that scene, I've noticed the editing in a few spots of that scene is real abrupt. And to that, I think because there are flashes of frontal nudity in it, I think they may have been pushing that R rating even then a little too far, might have been threatened with an X rating if they didn't cut a little of that scene. And I think that's what's going on there, because at that time, a major studio film could still get an actual X rating, Clockwork Orange did. So I think that, I think you can kind of see that there, but.
And I think that people who saw that for the first time probably thought they saw more nudity than they really saw. You know, it's because of the way it's cut, it gives you the impression of more that's real. And what I had heard was that they couldn't get anybody to let them use an indoor pool. So they had to take a pool and shoot everything on this side, and they shot everything on that side later. So all the stuff with her on the diving board, all of that was shot separately. And the only people there were the cameraman and the boom operator, and that's it. And nobody else was on set for that part of it.
And that, you know, the novel is semi-autobiographical. And I know some guys from Wichita Falls who have told me that, Wichita Falls, and Archer City and in that area, they know who it was who was throwing those parties back in 1951, which is when it takes place. So that was based on something quite real that was happening then. Yeah.
So Russ, you sounds like you have a question there.
Yeah, I don't know when you're ready to hear from the peanut gallery. Is it now?
I am interested in what you have to say.
Oh, all right. Well, you know, I feel like the movie's got to be about something else, and I'm not sure I can put my finger on it, but you know, because what you look at when you see all these despairing people and bored people is, well, why don't they just leave? You know, it's horrible, so leave. And so I don't know. I guess I see it more as a kind of a psychological allegory. And I think of that line from Auden in Praise of Limestone, I think, where he says, in the prison of his days, and then it goes on to say, teach the free man how to praise. And I think all those people are in a prison of their days, and they don't know how, you know, their inability, you know, people don't know how to get in their out of their psychological prisons. You think, well, just be different, right? Don't fix that, change. Well, why doesn't Sonny keep driving? It's true that he's lonely, but it's because he doesn't know how to, he can't get out of his prison. He can't get out of the thing that he's trapped into. Why doesn't beautiful Ellen Burstyn leave her husband? I mean, in a literal psychological sense, she could just leave the guy. I mean, she's got other prospects. You know, I think that's true of just about everybody. So to me, it only works as a kind of psychological allegory, because otherwise I find myself saying, you know, why is there this unmitigated and unending despair? You know, nobody gets away. Well, the only person who gets away is the shallow bitch, you know, who goes to SMU, right? Well, and where does she go? When she gets out, she keeps being a shallow bitch wherever she goes. So, I mean, she's not learning. And then when what's this? When you know, the guy who went to Korea, I'm blanking out.
Right.
Not Sonny.
Duane.
Yeah, Duane. Sorry. Well, he's going to get his head blown off, and so there's no way out. And I don't know. I that's kind of, I'm not sure how to,
I would
something
say-
else needs to be made of it. But anyway,
my reaction to that is, I think it's fear. It's absolute fear of going to the big city. That there is a kind of comfort and acceptance acceptance and rejection at the same time of people living in a small town. And I think that a lot of people, just are afraid to go to the big city. And there's so much unknown.
but
there.
let me just ask you, do you think that's worth making a movie about? I'm not sure that it is.
Well, okay, so let me just take a moment here.
Yeah, I'm being
No.
argumentative on purpose just for the heck of it.
But I want to take this like further, because my sense
Okay.
is fear of going to the city, right? And taking to this sense of where we are now, where we have rural America, which is deeply afraid, right? Right? The heart of Trump country is in that city. And what is the mindset of the people that are there? There's a kind of loneliness, a sadness, and an absolute fear that the people at SMU will look down at them. And I think that's what keeps them there. And that divide is still with us.
There's also a theme in the film about the effect of television on the town when people start getting television and don't even want to go to the one theater there, the one that has the actual last picture show.
Okay, so I want to answer Stephen's questions about then why did it have such an effect on young New York college kid and his friends in 1971? Because it's all the same everywhere, which is a very good point. I mean, yes, we all as people relate to the situations that people are in. I mean, we feel them. We feel what's going on. In that scene at the end of the film, we kind of really feel that. We feel that because of the great performances. But in many films, we get to experience a world that we'll never live in. We get to see, what it's like to live in Japan in a Kurosawa film. We get to see all kinds of worlds that we'll never experience, yet we feel the common humanity and the common way that people are both kind, beautiful, and shitty to each other, which we see in all movies, right? So there is this kind of sameness and the things that we can relate to. And if you think about this, okay, coming from this sort of dichotomy we have. So this script, this book is written by somebody who lived in this town and feels this and knows this through his bone, right? Where did Peter Bogdanovich grow up? Gordon, I'm sure you know this.
He was northern. Gosh, you're going to put me to this, and I should know because I was just reading his biography this morning. But isn't it in New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that he like that he has that immediate relationship to that life. So, but he used McMurtry and his novel and his experience in developing the script with him to fully understand. So he has the sort of emotional sense of that space through his research. And then taking that and working with his actors to sort of portray that. And working with the actors in a way where he's with them for all the time, that they feel like totally connected to each other. And they feel as a troupe, and this is truly an ensemble performance, that there is a kind of connection between them. But also being in that town where they were for 11 weeks, is that what the shooting was? Something like that?
And yeah, about that in Polly Platt's, the Polly Platt podcast, she says through being reenacted, of course, but that the final day of shooting was actually Christmas Eve, 1970. So they went from about October to Christmas Eve.
So my point is that if all of the actors are living in this small town, it's like they absorb the tempo of the town, the space of the town, what the pool hall is like, the little luncheonette counter is like, and that you like places help you feel their rhythm, and sort of being there for a long time and spending time with the director, I think really helped to sort of solidify that worldview. And there's an interesting comment here from somebody on Facebook, Jamal, who says it's about the degradation of morals in a small town which symbolized the whole country through sex and loneliness. So, you know, in a sense, is it really the degradation of morals? Doesn't every small town have people that have affairs and do those things? Or was that time in the 50s a sort of difference? And if that's true, isn't that what's going on now? That people in the small town think that people in big cities have no morals, and that's why they hate them and all of that. Is that really much different now? And I don't know the answer. I'm just asking these questions.
I think the only thing is different is they're more willing to talk about it now. They're more willing to have those things known, because, you know, same things were going on in 1951, but you know, it was always to put up a front that those things don't happen here, you know, much more secrecy.
Well, Gordon, what I was going to say is, you know, flippantly, well, they didn't have the internet back then. But if you think about it, how did people communicate back then? Well, there's a telephone that's there sometimes. There's television, but not, it's just beginning. It's at its real infancy there. The way that most of those people connected to the world was from the last picture show, was in the movies. The movie is their main window to a world outside of the world they live in. Anyway, just a thought. I don't mean to belabor that.
He's from Kingston, New York. I just saw a chat message.
91 miles. So it's nice that we have our researchers on this.
I knew it was New York or New Jersey. I was trying to think. Are you all right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm just going to die because I had my shot. So just.
Hey, I do want us, you mentioned it earlier. I do want us to talk about the music, because it was, I think the time I saw it when he was here for the second or third AFI Dallas Festival, I noticed there is no original music in it at all. It's all source music.
And it's nonstop.
And it's
I mean,
nonstop.
For the first, 40 minutes, it seems like there's a piece of music everywhere. And it's like every sort of classic country song from that era is in that movie.
And I absolutely love the way from the first time I saw it, he ends it with Hank Williams singing "Why Don't You Love Me Like You Used to Do," coming right after the scene with Cloris Leachman and Tim Bottoms. I think that's just a stroke of genius right there for me.
Also, a lot of Hank Williams, that's true. And it's all country equals depressing.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing about country music is about storytelling, much more so than other forms of pop music. You know, there's somebody had an affair, and they're trucking all night or whatever it is. It's more of a narrative structure in country music, and particularly in country music videos. There was it's a whole nother story that I don't really want to talk about anymore. But yeah, the music, I think, really sets a tone in the same way that, say, what's the George Lucas film about all the pop music in it?
American Graffiti.
American Graffiti. Thank you. I mean, what would American Graffiti be without that music? The music sets the time, it sets the pace of every scene. And this music, again, just like the cinematography, the sense of space, it sets a worldview that the characters live in. It helps to pace the film, but it sort of drives the film in a very powerful way.
You know, one of the songs in it is actually Tony Bennett's cover of "Your Cheating Heart." It's not Hank Williams, it's Tony Bennett in the hospital scene, kind of a jazzy version of "Your Cheating Heart."
Yeah.
But it was a big hit for Tony Bennett at the time, I understand.
And what a moment in the hospital scene where he won't even see her.
Right.
I mean, and it's like, that's one of the moments I did remember. And I just, how powerful, that was and how sad that was. Um, yeah, like all of the characters live to disappoint us, with the exception of Sam. Sam never disappoints.
Yeah.
Yes, Russ. Russ, we need to hear you.
Unmute yourself.
Your MOS.
Unmute.
There were two others. Well, one really tiny scene that I thought was powerful, and I wonder who in the heck this actor was. But the guy who played Sonny's dad, when they had that brief meeting at the dance,
yeah, dance, yeah.
That was really powerful. And I thought, who in the heck is that guy? I thought, he didn't seem like a professional actor. I remember James Dickey appeared, did cameos in some of the, like in Deliverance or something.
Deliverance.
And I wondered if maybe it was someone like that. But, the way they had nothing to say to each other and clearly never had, was really powerful.
There's actually only 2 times you see their parents, and that's one. And then at the end, Jeff Bridges and his mother, and they supposedly even went back and shot a few more scenes when the people looking at the first rough cut said, when they're not in school, where are they all the time? Where do they sleep? And they went back and added a few more scenes to explain.
Right. There's a scene when he's in the cafe and you're still staying at we're staying. Yeah, I remember. And that's specifically to answer that question.
Oh, who was that actress? Her first major role too. Damn it, I'll think of it in a minute.
The waitress.
Yeah.
Eileen.
She was great. I mean, she was
Eileen Brennan.
Eileen Brennan. Yeah. I'm sorry. I wanted to quickly also say that the scene where Sonny is holding the down markers at the football game, towards the end, that was another. Of course, all that movie was one heartbreaking scene after another, but that one was particularly heartbreaking because I mean, he'd gone from being the co-captain of the team that got beaten, 102 to 14, and then his next step in the natural progression is to be the guy that holds the down marker. And that, well, if he's going to hold the down marker when he's 19, why isn't he going to hold it when he's 69?
But that's not even the worst part of it. The worst part of that scene is when they said, "Oh, when were you here?" "Oh, it was last year."
Last year, right? Yeah.
Ooh, man, just stick that a little further.
The football coach, by the way, shout out the great Dallas actor Bill Thurman as Coach Popper, who is in just about every movie made in Dallas area for 2 or 3 decades, and that was one of his claims to fame in a movie film, was playing that part.
So there was one thing that I actually wish was in the movie. In that scene in the car where Sonny is with what's her name, the mother, and finds out that indeed she was the one who Sam was in love with. And I just wanted him to say, "And do you still have that silver coin?"
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Ellen Burstyn,
right? Because that was such a thing. It's like, and I bet she still has that. And it would have been just such a nice, like a upper moment. It'd be nice to have a good moment there.
I'll have to check the book. I scanned through it for the major scenes. A lot of the dialogue is verbatim from the book. It is a very, very, very good adaptation of the book.
Sam here says, any thoughts on Texasville?
I don't think it's very good. It's in bright color, which is, to me, they're just 2 different worlds. And I know a lot of people who worked on it. All the respect to the people here who worked on that film. I don't think it's very good. we showed it, had to show it from a laser disc when he was here 2010, I think. That was about the only way you could get it then.
Yeah, and doesn't that say enough? That's all you need.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it is indeed 8:30, and thank you all for coming to the last picture show discussion. Next week we have a special for Mardi Gras, really wonderful film, and I think we're going to have 3 people to talk about it. So please check that out. And also next week on Thursday, the very same day, is go to firebones.org, and you can start the Firebones experience. And if you look carefully, yes, indeed, I do have a small acting role in this, which
Oh.
in and of itself was pretty strange. It's hard to edit yourself. I, of course, wanted to edit all my shots out, but they were narratively important. So I could.
It's 3.5 hours, you said?
It's 4.5 hours.
Oh, you did say 4.5 hours.
But it's not at all meant to be seen in one day. And a lot of the longest episodes are the audio only episodes, because that's where there's like really good backstory and really great writing. My partner in this, Greg, is just an incredible writer. He's the head of the creative writing program at SMU. He also publishes the Southwest Review, which is a major poetry and literature journal in Southwest, and just a really, incredible creative force. Anyway, so check it out. It's like I said, I guarantee you will not see anything else that resembles it. It's a totally unique, but sometimes funny, sometimes goofy, sometimes heartwarming, but it's quite a unique experience. So guys, Gordon, thank you for suggesting this, because had you not suggested this, I would have not watched it again. And it was it was a good thing to see this film and to experience this film. And Bogdanovich has made a lot of work, and a lot of it good, some not so good. Always there's something interesting, but I think this film sort of hits a deeper place than most of his other work does.
If I can add one more thing about it, is that also let's not forget Polly Platt's contribution to it. The design, she did a whole lot of things on it. She did the makeup and the hair on it. She did the costume. She was responsible for a lot of the texture, period texture, and she didn't work on, as someone just pointed out, she didn't work on Texasville.
And it's important to get those things right. I mean, the details are like when it is so much about place, like what people are wearing, what their rooms look like as they walk in and out of them, are really kind of crucial. And this gives you, having not grown up and not spent very much time in a small Texas town, it evokes that sense of spirit. Yes, Russ.
Well, I think there was one funny moment in the movie. I could only think of one. And it's when Sam was sitting there by the pond and they were fishing, and he looked out at the bleak landscape and he said, it hasn't always been so beautiful out here.
That's right.
Yeah, they used to have these mesquite trees or something like that. And that was the only time I came close to laughing.
It's maybe 3, I think, funny moments in it.
Probably so.
And Sam's character, I think that I think he's the closest of being, I wouldn't call him happy, but he seemed okay with his lot, resigned to it, but kind of enjoyed it in a way that other people couldn't have that sense of like just enjoying knowing who they were and thinking that's okay. I think he had a sadness that he missed the love of his life, but he certainly was able to live a good life with that sadness. But the other characters have deeper issues. Yes, and the pool table. All right, guys, thank you all very much. We'll see you next week. Thank you for coming. I really, really appreciate all of you. Have a great week, right? And we'll see you soon.